Hello, welcome to a Tuesday night edition of Steve Gosney Show, and welcome to all my friends. And I've got a very special guest today. I found him; it was referred to me by Megan Fox, and then I started reading this guy's bio, and I'm like, man, this guy, he is like my brother from another mother. Man, this guy is a younger version of me and a little bit tanner, and his name is Demetrius Minor. Welcome.
Hey, Steve, glad to be with you. And that is quite the intro there.
Well, tell us about you. Tell me, I just met you for the first time about 10 seconds before we went on.
Yeah.
Go ahead and let's introduce yourself for the peoples.
Well, I am the national manager for conservatives concerned about the death penalty. I am also a preacher, an author, poet. Some of my work has been featured in the Washington Times, in Newsweek, in Town Hall. I'm also the former coalition's director for the Americans for Prosperity chapter in the state of Florida. I have a background in television and radio. All that to say, Steve, all that to say.
Come on, this is you're singing from my heart. You don't know, man. You are me.
All that to say, I run my mouth for a living.
Yes, well, you're in the right place. We're just gonna have to step on each other. That's all it is. Yeah. And so well, give us you are from originally from Augusta, GA. Is this
Augusta,
true?
GA. That is true. Born in Ohio, but raised in Georgia. And Georgia is where I graduated middle school, high school, and college.
Oh, so, what are you an Uga?
So ironically enough, I am a Buckeye. But the Bulldogs are my second favorite team and my favorite SEC team. So as long as I'm not playing Ohio State, I will say go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Are you a Buccaneer fan?
Ambivalent.
Ambivalent.
I've had the opportunity to go to some Bucs games and playoff games. I did see Tom Brady when he played against the Rams, and he threw a touchdown pass, the go-ahead touchdown pass in the waning seconds of the game, and that was fun. But I did see his last game, unfortunately, when they got demolished just about by the Cowboys. So, I'm a casual
pro guy, but more of a college guy.
Huh? More of a college. Baseball is my favorite sport.
Oh, baseball.
Okay. Baseball is my passion, followed by basketball, and then some college football. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, let's say hello to the people, and then we'll talk a little James Brown, and then we'll get into some more serious topics.
All right. Yeah. Always
thank you very much for taking time out of your day. And let's see, we've got Shane Sousa, my honorable mod, and the expert is here. He's the expert, Yellow, Orange, Red, the great editor for my upcoming novel. And actually, she suggested a lot of ideas. We've got Purple Ivy, hey, Lee, 8 o'clock, right on the money. Sadie, Orange, let's see, Lee, Sadie, say the same chatter. Oh, Just Dawn, good to see you. Sandra, Bella the Bayou, first up in Rumble, always Bella the Bayou, reliable. And Upon the Horizon, out of nowhere, good to see you. Upon the Horizon, he's going to be here to check our. Now, I am Catholic, so I will say that are you Protestant? Would that be fair? Or are you?
Yeah, that will be fair. I'm of the Apostolic Pentecostal faith.
Okay, and you are a preacher, so you actually have a congregation that you speak at?
Yeah, I serve in ministry at Tampa Life Church, which is obviously in Tampa, Florida, and my father, for a brief period of time, pastored when he did a tour of duty in Korea and also in Georgia. So he actually started pastoring during my later years of high school. And my godfather pastored in Atlanta, and I assisted him with that ministry as well. As far as preaching goes, I've been preaching for a little bit over 20 years.
Excellent. Well, John H., good to see you. And Upon the Horizon says he was raised Catholic, but you're Protestant now, right? But I'll say he's my go-to. He knows his biblical quotations. I'm a convert, so he can trump me anytime with Catholic with biblical quotation questions. He'll check you if you get out of line. So, and I'll just read his stuff and we'll echo back. But let's see. Well, okay. Let's start with the most important stuff first, and that is James Brown. And we were talking.
Yeah.
What's that?
The Godfather of Soul.
Godfather. And when I was growing up, I liked James Brown. It's like, okay, he was a singles guy, and so it's like, oh, I appreciate that song, and I like that song. You know, I feel good. But then my son, and we're both bass players, as you can see, my musical stuff, and he started listening to James Brown heavy in middle school and high school, and so we were, a lot of James Brown. And boy, I'll tell you, I gained a whole new respect for him as an innovator and is so far ahead of his time. Part of the thing is like he was so early and so great. I mean, it was like that. James Brown is truly one of the American greats of this country.
You're absolutely right. Definitely, you can easily put him on a Mount Rushmore of all-time performers. And so many great hits. Papa Got a Brand New Bag. Santa Claus Goes Straight to the Ghetto. Actually, my favorite James Brown song is Living in America.
Oh yeah, it's his last big hit. Yeah, that was when I was growing up in the 80s. I'm an Xer. You're a millennial, so yeah, it'll date me a little bit. I remember when that song came out, but it was like, okay, he was one of these old guys but I mean, the guy was so groundbreaking, and he was a self-made man who lived the American dream. Actually, I visited Augusta, Georgia with my son because we wanted to go see the James Brown Museum. They had an exhibit, but it's like his estate is so scattered. They don't have their act together yet.
Yeah, so. It's unfortunate. The back and forth and the disarray that has been in the public eyesight for quite some time concerning the family and the settling of the estate. But James Brown is of paramount significance in Augusta, Georgia, and he's actually from, I forgot the name of the small city in South Carolina that's not too far from Augusta, but he spent the bulk of his time in Augusta and was known for just showing up at restaurants and greeting people and being very charitable, not just with his money but with his time. And just a musical hero.
Another one, I'm a big Prince fan, and Prince also kind of left a mess with his estate. Although his family was able to get it together a lot better than James Brown. James Brown had like kind of all these different kids by different people, and they didn't really. They're still fighting. I think, I don't know. The lawyers will end up with all the money.
Prince was a musical genius. I think. This is just my opinion. I think Michael Jackson is arguably the greatest entertainer of all time. And I'm a big Elvis fan as well. But Michael Jackson, to me, is in a realm by himself.
Okay, now you're throwing out the flag. All right, go ahead. Say your piece. Say your piece, Demetrius.
I think Prince, and the reason why I put Michael Jackson out there is because of the international allure that he had. But Prince is in that conversation, and probably one of the most gifted musicians of all time, because he could play just about anything,
and he could play it better than anybody else. No, I must say that I think Prince blows the socks off Michael Jackson. I mean, this thing is, when I was growing up, there was the big Michael Jackson Prince debate, because I remember Off the Wall and all the girls. There was like camp. And but as a musician, I respect Prince. He's on the Mount Rushmore with.
You're absolutely right that he blows Michael Jackson out of the water from a musician standpoint.
But I would say I'd put Elvis blows everybody. Elvis was the king for a reason, and he was just a powerful stage persona and had the charisma. So, you want to fight?
Well, listen, I am a huge Elvis fan. I actually had a chance to go to Graceland this past July. I had a chance to cross that off the bucket list. Obviously, as a fan, I had a deep appreciation for Graceland and the legacy of Elvis Presley. But what's so unique about Graceland is, even if you're a casual Elvis fan, or if you have an ambivalence towards Elvis, you can still appreciate the house, because I think the house is, I had to tell individuals that it's pretty modest for in terms of what you think of a mansion, right? And just what he was able to accomplish in, unfortunately, a short period of time, you will have an appreciation for the Presley estate and all that's featured there. I was there for 2.5 hours.
Now,
And
are you a musician also?
I play iTunes, and that's about it.
Okay. Were you an athlete, or were you
No,
more?
I very briefly played the saxophone, very briefly. And I did cross country, track for like half, not even half a semester. So
So you're like student government guy.
yeah, the history, the nerdy stuff.
Well, let's start with you said your book, because obviously one of the things I'm finding is there's not a lot of good book promotions. Obviously, I've got a lot of books here, and
Yeah.
there's not real good promotions for books out there. So I'm thinking I might just do that on my channel. I might just bring on authors that I think are cool and have them interviews like this, and let them tell us about your books, because there's no outlets for us independent writers. So, Mr. Minor, tell us about your book. What is it? And tell us what you are writing about.
Well, I wrote a book in 2015 entitled Preservation and Purpose: The Making of a Young Millennial, a Manifesto for Faith, Family, and Politics. And a year before the book was published, April 2014, we're actually coming up on the 10-year anniversary, was when it was revealed to me for the very first time in my life at the age of 28 that I was adopted. And when that was revealed, as you can imagine, I had this huge identity crisis. But I also came to the conclusion that two things could happen. These revelations can make me bitter, or it can make me better. And I was so convinced that the revelation of my adoption had God-given destiny behind the revelation, that I felt compelled to write a book about it. I had already been toying with the idea of writing a book. I was the first African American from Dayton, Ohio, to serve as a White House intern under the Bush administration, and I wanted to share my thoughts on that, about coming from a family who were primarily Democrats, me being the lone conservative, and how faith helped shape who I am politically as well as ministerially.
You're just dishing it up. There's so many ways we can go here. Let's see. Let's ask you, have you always been conservative, or was there a revelation moment that brought you into the fold?
It was the fall of 2000. Steve, I wasn't even old enough to vote. I was in Frederick, Maryland, and I think I was watching Saturday cartoons. I don't know Saturday cartoons, but I wasn't watching anything to do with politics. And my godfather, an African American pastor, out of nowhere, it was so random. He says, "Listen, Demetrius, I would never tell you how to vote, but I just want to tell you this: that just because you're Black doesn't mean you have to vote Democrat." And he just
right. So good for him. It's called freedom.
Well,
right.
So I 2000. I'm 15 at the time, and I just remember, where did that come from?
Yeah.
But that statement compelled me to take an interest in politics, and so I started doing research.
Do you have particular influences as far as writers or people in your life, or do you look to people that I mean, how is it that you developed your thoughts? Like you said, you were surrounded mostly with a Democrat family. Was it a political family, or was it sort of just a habitual Democrat voting family, and then you dove into it? And how did you grow it and nurture it?
It's a habitual voting family, but most of that was due to a traditional mindset. I came from even though it wasn't declared verbally, I came from a family that was very socially conservative. My father was a minister. I went to church faithfully. And so there were.
Well, I mean, just as a reflection, I mean, dealing with, I deal with a lot of the Black community in my life, I should say, all through my life. And I think if at the root, I'm always surprised by the overwhelming vote for the Democrats, because to me, the Republican Party and their conservatism is the natural home of the Black community. Because I mean, this is the party of Lincoln, the party of individual freedom, the party of family values and traditions and Christianity, and those things that we value. To me, those are the core and the heart of the strengths of the Black community. What say you, Mr. Minor?
Well, I would agree that at the core, minority households generally have heavy conservative views. But minorities started to drift away from the Republican Party. We can go back to the days of Goldwater and his opposition to the civil rights movement, and that's when you started to see the exodus and migration of Black voters from the Republican Party to the Democrat Party. But I've always felt that Republicans or conservatives in general are really good at giving a history lesson of what the Republican Party is great at, but they haven't necessarily been productive or successful at telling minority voters what they are for.
You are so right. You're knocking it out of the park. It's like
well,
you should think about going into speaking and talking about this sort of stuff. You ever thought
well,
about
it's crossed my mind a time or two.
Yeah, cross your mind. Yeah, okay, so you're right about that. I mean, we
Yeah.
do have a problem intentionally, because
So
they
I
like to
write,
scratch
I write about that. I write about my adoption. I share my adoption testimony. I share what has shaped me culturally, spiritually, and I take the reader through a timeline of significant events that have occurred in my life, including adoption, that made me into the person that I am at that time, and obviously still holds true to this day. Yeah.
Now, you put in the book's title, which is fascinating, millennial. So that's a generational appeal. Well,
Yes, sir.
how do you think that generational appeal has affected you as a person?
You cut out very briefly. Do you mind repeating that question?
Yeah. You put millennial in your book, right? So
Yes, sir.
obviously you're impacted as an individual, as part of a generation, right? The millennial generation. How would you say that? How does that fit into your identity? How would you define that piece of yourself that is millennial? How would you describe that, and why is it relevant?
That's a great question. I view millennials as creative, as innovative, as free thinkers. Millennials are individuals that don't just go along with a narrative just because it's presented to them.
Wait, we have to hold on a second. I'm going to have to stop you for a second. We got a little raid going on. So we got EU and Dolly raid. Hello, Raiders. Welcome to the Steve Cosby Show. We got Demetrius Minor, who's a fascinating individual that I've been looking forward to. I got turned on him, and I was like, the more I read about him, the more I'm like, this is like me as a millennial. So now he's explaining how he's different from me by being a millennial. So I'm sorry. We had a raid. We have to salute the Raiders that come in. So
Good deal.
Go ahead. Repeat. Go ahead. Start again. I'm sorry. I had to interrupt, because Raiders you must honor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Millennials are individuals who are innovative, they're creative, they're free thinkers. They're not just going to go along with a narrative just because it's presented to them and they're expected to. They're going to think things out for themselves. And so they're very inquisitive. And so because of that nature, because of that dichotomy, they're the ones who are uh, going to have the mantle of leadership transferred to them. They're the ones that are going to be making major decisions, especially in the areas of policy. They're going to have a generational impact on those who come after them. So it is a call to leadership. It is a call to action for millennials to not simply sit on the sidelines and watch the world go by, but to get involved in some type of leadership process, whether that's running for office or being a candidate or being involved in the faith community, but to tap into their passions, to tap into their niche, and to offer themselves a service.
Excellent.
That's what I hope my generation does.
Well, and you also put in there, of course, faith. And I'm kind of known as the outspoken conservative Catholic on the law stream or things, right? And
Yeah.
I believe very strongly that we need to incorporate faith not just as something you do Sunday, but in every part of your life. It's what you live, it's who you are. And you
Yeah.
put that in your book too. You put faith as a primary part. So have you, it sounds to me like you were raised in a religious household. Could you tell me more
Yes.
about how you would define your faith?
Yeah. Faith is my identity. Faith shapes who I am. And it is my attempt, although I'm not always great at it, but it is my attempt to look through every area of life and every area of politics and policies through the lens of faith. So my faith is in Jesus Christ, the author and the finisher of my faith according to Scripture. I am a staunch believer. I got saved at the age of 7. Felt the call to preach.
Okay, so very young. Right?
Yeah, very young. And it is my purpose for people to see the light of Christ through me. And my goal and my purpose is not to advance my agenda or to elevate my platform, but simply to help advance the kingdom of God. And I think there's different ways to do that. I find politics and policy as one avenue. But whatever talents and giftings that the good Lord has been gracious enough to allocate towards me, I want to return it by essentially to help populate heaven. So,
Well, God bless you. And and my book Prepare. There's 2 chapters in that book about my faith and my coming to faith and what my core beliefs are. And what you said though is really, I mean, I think that most of the problems in our society come from a lack of faith in the right things. We put our faith in all that we are not following the first commandment. And I really feel that is almost the root of all of our problems. Whenever I
yeah,
dig and dig and dig, it seems like it comes down to that. So you are, and you've got a lot of charisma. I got to tell you, now interacting with you, because we just met. I mean, this is like 10 seconds before it came on. It's like click. But you have a lot of charisma, and I can see God in your heart. And I mean, that's the thing. When I see somebody who has a lot of faith, like you're saying, it's like it radiates from within. It's like you're happy yourself because you've built your life on something that's solid. You have a firm foundation for which you can build your life. The certainty is there, the structure, the solidity is there, and you've placed your roots in the right soil.
Steve, you're absolutely right. And I want to thank you for saying the kind words that you did. Is that there's a value system. There are a set of principles that are present and will not waver, regardless of what the political climate may be. And you said something that was very spot on and very true about how individuals have lost faith in today's age. And I believe a good reason for that, Steve, is because if you don't have hope, you don't have faith. And people want hope. I recently said this in a sermon, is that hope is the expression of faith, but hopelessness is the enemy of faith. And I am convinced that if the enemy causes us to lose hope, we may not know the answers. Well, I don't want to say we may not know. We don't know all the answers, right? We don't know what tomorrow holds, but we can at least have hope in God that our struggles, the tests and trials, and the circumstances and the crises that we encounter in life, number one, they're temporal. Number one, they serve a purpose. Number three, it increases our dependence on God. We know that the scripture tells us that what the enemy meant for evil, the Lord meant it for our good, and that the Lord has the ability to reverse any negative outcome that may try to come upon us. So we can put our hope in our blessed Savior. But for those who don't know the gospel, for those who don't have a relationship with God, it is easy for them to lose hope because they don't know what to put their faith in.
I want to ask you this because like a stream or two ago, I had somebody in the chat who was didn't have a lot of faith, and I think that we can be a little heavy-handed sometimes from the Christian side. So I think what you're talking about, leading by example and showing who you are and acting, and it's the worst thing you can do is preach one thing and act another. I mean, I think you either incorporate it throughout your life or you're not really following the Lord. But the problem of pain, which I always like C.S. Lewis and the problem of pain, and why is there suffering? And that is a lot of people, I think, in this world with the internet and the pipelines of suffering that we can view it a click away. It's a fundamental problem in all worldviews. And I think that I'd like to hear from you as somebody who is a minister who has faith. How do you answer the problem of pain and suffering in the world? That's a big question.
That is a big question, but I'm so glad you asked me. So December of last year, I completed a Bible study that I felt the Holy Spirit impress upon me that helps individuals navigate through pain. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say it's the template for someone who's experienced grief and loss and pain. I just want to say it's a template. I felt that the Lord gave me some revelation and some insight about pain because, unfortunately, pain has been a frequent companion of mine during life. So I named the Bible study "Good Grief."
Little Charlie Brown reference. That's good grief. That's great. That's good.
Understanding the language of pain.
Pain good grief. Let me soak this in for a second. Good grief.
Good grief.
The language of pain.
The language.
Explain that. That's fascinating.
So pain speaks a language, right? And oftentimes or not, we are tempted to ignore the pain or to medicate the pain instead of attempting to understand the message that pain is trying to convey. And our Savior can identify with pain because that was something that when Jesus walked the earth, something that he encountered quite often.
And suffered the ultimate pain, really, at the crucifixion, at the Calvary, right?
110%, right? And he experienced pain from people that you would least expect, people that you would have thought would have been an ally, turned their back on him. So,
and how painful! That's not physical pain. That is spiritual pain, right? Betrayal is one of the most core pains that we can experience as human beings.
Pain and grief comes in different forms. Whether you're mourning the loss of a loved one, or you're mourning the loss of a career or a transition in life, we all experience some type of pain on some level. And so the Apostle Paul, I think it's very interesting that he says to enjoy the fellowship of his suffering. The fellowship, when you're fellowshipping.
This is so good. Keep going. I got something to say, but you're doing so good. I want to interrupt. Go ahead.
When we're fellowshipping, that means you're staying a while. You're lingering, right? So in that pain, the longer we stay, the longer we stay, the better we can form a relationship with our Savior. Because he identifies with pain. He speaks to us the pain. And the pain is not insignificant. The pain is not without purpose, because ultimately, God is going to get glory out of whatever it is that we're suffering. And it allows for us to experience him in a more deeper and intimate way.
Well, this echoes one of my favorite sermons I think I've ever heard. Our priest, Father Bill, it resonated with me in a way that I can't real, but you remind this what you're saying here reminds me so much. And the thing he said that stuck with me was, contemplate Jesus on the cross and the transcendence, the salvation that came through that suffering. So when you're in pain, go to church, look at that crucifix, pray, and contemplate Jesus' suffering and why his suffering resulted in a victory for us. And our faith in it's really, and it's very hard because it's such a weird religion. I mean, if you step back and you said, we are saved because this person who came to earth and God man was crucified, we killed him, posted him on a cross and betrayed him and neglected him, and our salvation comes through that. It's a weird thing. I mean, nobody would have come up with that, right? I mean, this is like, it's incomprehensible for us humans. But yet I found that sometimes when I'm suffering and I'm in church, I'll look at the cross and I'll think about that, and I'll think about that, and I'll think about it as a transcendent, a beautiful thing and a transcendent thing. And it does provide some healing. And it echoes kind of what you're saying, very similar to that.
So I think you're absolutely right, Steve. So a lot of times in the context of pain and grief, we attempt to find closure. But in my study, in some of the revelations that God was giving me when I was writing this Bible study, and Steve, I'll be more than happy to send you a copy, was that grief isn't necessarily designed to bring closure to the situation, but it is designed to bring us closer to God. Because when you think of closure, it's right there within the word, to close. That means to have finality, to bring an end. But we are never going to get totally over the death of a loved one. We are never going to ever totally forget the abuse. We will get victory. We will get peace. But I'm not convinced that one ever receives closure, because, again, closure symbolizes finality. So we won't actually receive that until Christ returns to take us home. But we will draw closer to God as a result of our pain. And
we have the chat is going nuts over here, and it's all good. They're loving you. And I told you, see, where else can you get such a great guest? See, I find these great people and bring them on, and this is so exciting. Grill of Jake Gracefully. Mimi, how do I get a copy of your study website link? So go ahead and give me a little promo.
So listen, the Bible study is in PDF form. So I will send it to you, Steve, and you can send it out. Or I'm gonna give you my email address, and people can feel free to contact me. I have to share this because we're a couple weeks away from Easter. After the resurrection, oh my God, this is so good. And I know we did not plan to discuss this.
No, well, we'll get to the public.
Everything is divinely orchestrated.
So great.
So after the resurrection of Christ, when Jesus revealed himself to his disciples for the first time, Do you know what he did?
You're testing me. Okay, I'll go ahead. Is that rhetorical? Go ahead, lay it on me.
He pointed to his scars as a way of identification. Okay? He pointed to his scars as a way for his disciples to identify them. And so after he identified the source of pain, he gave them a promise. And he told them, he says, that I am going to prepare a place for you, that where I am, there you may be also. So he used his pain and he used his scars to create a pathway for power and for promise. So all that to say,
this is great.
Our pain brings us closer to our purpose.
I love it. This is so good.
Our pain brings us closer to our promise, and that God will help your pain to identify more deeper and more closely with Him.
Roosty is on here. He's saying hallelujah. He's loving your and I do too. This is wonderful. And I don't know how much time you have, but believe me, you're the kind of guy I could just talk with all night. All right. But let's maybe we can circle back, but I do want to, because the promise of the stream was conservatives against the death penalty. Now, let's so I'm going to transition, talk about painful subjects. I do criminal appeals in Daytona. So I have clients on death row. I do their direct appeals and argue before the Supreme Court. My objective in my career is to have Florida's death penalty statute deemed unconstitutional, or to have it repealed by the people and to bring them back. And so I have currently 2 books on the death penalty. I'm working on a third one right now at work. The first one is Death Penalty Debates, Net Positive or Net Negative, which is all the policy. I think I might have sent you this book on ebook. All the positives and then all the negatives. I've got 10 positives and 19 negatives. And then Death Penalty Desires, which is a criminal trial from beginning, middle to end, all the way through the arc of a trial, to kind of so that you can live it and understand what it's like from the inside, from the lawyers and the system, so you fully understand. And then my next book that I'm working on now is a handbook for criminal appellate lawyers who deal with the death penalty, on why Florida's death penalty statute is unconstitutional. So those 3 will go together as sort of a set. Now, you, on the other hand, one of the reason I invited you on, and this is all this other stuff, this is all bonus material, all right? But because you are involved, how are you involved with go ahead, tell them about your organization and what it's about.
Yeah, I'm the national manager for conservatives concerned about the death penalty. And essentially, we help educate and mobilize conservatives, libertarians, right of center audiences, grassroots activists, policymakers to take action against capital punishment. And so, again, part of that role is speaking out about it and meeting with lawmakers to discuss certain legislation that's on the docket that needs to be heard, that needs to be passed. And so
you're in the right place. I mean, Florida, you're in Tampa, and we are ground zero for the death penalty. We are so out of sync with not only the country, but the world. Yeah, we are in love with the death penalty in Florida. Now, why do you think that is? That's my first, especially since we have, it seems like our conservative legislature and our conservative governor, who I voted for, who is my representative, I sent him up originally. DeSantis was my representative. His wife got me to vote for her husband the first time he got sent to Congress, came to my house, right? And yet he's just in love with this death penalty. Now, and it hurts me because, but of course, what is the issues that drive you and all? And I mean, obviously there are other issues I like that he does, but why are conservatives and the Republicans in Florida so in love with the death penalty?
Well, for full disclosure, I'm a member of Governor DeSantis' Faith and Community Initiative. I wrote an article in Newsweek a while back that says, Governor DeSantis, I'm a supporter of yours, but you are wrong. Respectfully, you are wrong on the death penalty. I think, first of all, it's an emotional reaction. And for those who are proponents and advocates for the death penalty, from a mere human level, human perspective, I understand why someone would support capital punishment. It's inherent in human nature to want retribution, to want revenge in the name of justice. And I think a lot of the recent death penalty legislation that has been passed is a knee-jerk reaction to the horrible tragedy that took place in Parkland. That's what I think is in response to. But respectfully, knee-jerk emotional reactions is not a good template for good policy. And the death penalty is not a deterrence on the crime. It doesn't make the public any safer. And especially for my conservative friends, there's this notion that you want to be tough on crime. And so a lot of them favor capital punishment because they don't want to be soft on crime. But the fact of the matter is that it's not being smart on crime to support a policy that is not going to serve as a deterrence to crime.
Okay, here we have a question, and if yellow, orange, red, you need to get death penalty debates because this is fully laid out.
Yeah.
The death penalty is definitely there is no evidence that it is a deterrent.
Yeah.
They're only, and I lay this out in the book. It's possible that it could be a specific deterrent in very specific situations. But other than that, as a general deterrent, it absolutely is not that. And there's been a lot of studies on this. And it's a very good point. A lot of people say that it's a deterrent. It is not a deterrent. That is not an argument. It's also not an argument against it, other than to say that it's a wash, and that's not where we should be fighting the battle. I mean, now, and I'd say the only thing I would concede a tiny, tiny little speck of certain people could be deterred in specific situations. For example, a child rapist who is very calculating. I've dealt with pedophiles, and they're very methodical in what they do, and they plan things out, and they know how far to push the pieces. And if they know that extra move will cause an extra pit of pain for them, they will not make that move. So only in that particular case would I say it's possible it's a specific deterrent.
Let me also speak very quickly to the subject of child rapists and pedophilia, things of that nature. So most times, when a sex crime is being committed against the child knows the offender, right? There's
very, very, very rarely is it a child abduction. That is so rare that it's within the tens. Correct. I mean, in the country annually. So usually the vast offenses are committed by interfamily or friends within social groups, opportunity rather than predation. Murder is way more common than actual child abduction. But go ahead. I'm sorry.
So, the purpose of me saying that is a bond is forged between the perpetrator and the victim. It may be a trauma bond, an emotional bond, but some type of bond is forged, which means it makes it even tougher and more difficult for that child to come out and identify who the perpetrator is if that person knows that they're going to get a death penalty. Because, albeit in a very warped way, you're now removing someone that person has had and some type of emotional connection with.
Well,
Me,
we had a story. There's a story in death penalty
and
debates.
what I mean by that is now you've added to the trauma.
No, I'm with you. I absolutely 100%. The people that say, "Well, I'm for the death penalty because I'm for the survivors," right? I'm for for example. And there's a story in the book that is a true story within my office. And we had a father murdered their child, and the entire family did not want the death penalty. 100%. All of them were on our side of the table, and the prosecutor's office continued to seek the death penalty for him. And then not only that, when the family wanted to speak to the court and the jury to tell them that we are unified, that we do not want the death penalty to our family member, the prosecutor shut us down and would not allow the family to speak to the court. So, this is, it's like, well, so are you really speaking for the victim's family? No, not that's, and it can also divide families when they should be unified. It's creating, like, some people that are very anti-death penalty. Now, all of a sudden I'm confronted with this thing. Now that divides the family that needs unification at that very moment.
Right.
Can I ask you, because we got a lot of good calls. Look at the comments are just rocking. I want to get to read them all. Let's see. I do want to get in. I want to integrate these things because one of the anti-death penalty chapters, or one of the positions, is my faith. And to me, my faith is very strong against the death penalty, and that is very important to me. Now, I lay it out that way so you can weigh for yourself, because you may not have faith. You may not be worldview. If not, then you can weigh it accordingly, right? But I did put it out there because it is part of why I'm against it. Now, what does your faith specifically say in the death penalty? How much of a factor is that in your anti-death penalty stance?
So how I came to oppose the death penalty was in the early 2000s. I was having a conversation with my pastor at the time about what it means to be pro-life. And we were talking about that. And very casually, the conversation of the death penalty came up. Now, let me say this. I had never done any research into the death penalty, never really thought much about it, but I was pro-death penalty because as a conservative, that's what was expected out of me. That's the standard.
Right. You kind of follow the team, right? My team says that, okay, well, sounds reasonable.
Correct. Well, my pastor said something very profound. He just says, well, it's very hard to be pro-life and simultaneously pro-death. And so then I had to do some self-evaluation to make sure that my views were being consistent with my pro-life stance. My pro-life stance is based off of my faith in God and the Bible. And so I began to search the scriptures, and I began to see that the death penalty is about retribution and about punishment, but Christ is about restoration and redemption. And so therefore, that death penalty position, that death penalty support position that I held was in stark contrast to my faith. Now, for those that want to use the Bible to justify the death penalty, I would just simply say this. It's one thing if Jesus Christ himself is coming down to earth and administering a death penalty sentence to someone. If that's the case, who am I to question his deity and sovereignty, right? But he's not doing that. So I would just simply ask people, do you trust the government as currently constructed to properly administer a death penalty sentence? And when I ask that question, generally I get a no response.
Right. Well, and it's a system that you're supporting. It's not like, because what people are often done is they're confronted with a bad fact situation. Like, okay, what about this? What about this case? Well, you give this guy. It's like, okay, well, we as voters, we as a community, we as a government, we don't get to make that call. We only get to support of the system generally. And that means not only the death penalty administered to the actual guilty people or the people that are the worst of the worst, but also used as a tool by prosecutors in other cases. And in Florida, we're #1 in exonerations. So, there was one up in Jacksonville in 2019. I think his name's Clifford Williams. And it's like served something like 35 years on death row and was exonerated. That means like not guilty, was not guilty at all. And I mean, we are #1. And it's interesting because when I was doing the research for this book, it seems to me that the more pro-death penalty a state is, the less protections for the innocent that there are, which is a very dangerous thing. So that means we have the lowest protections for actual innocence and the strictest punishments, which is a bad mix. And, and this thing is, I hope you would read Death Penalty Debates, because I've really worked very hard to basically, because I was I was on the prosecutor side, and I was about 60-40 pro death penalty, and I was in line to be a death penalty prosecutor when God said, I have a different mission for you. And since I've been over the public defender side and seen things from the other side, I'm 100% against it now. And that has to do with faith and all of the reasons that I stated in Death Penalty Debates. But I'm not. If it was an easy question, there would just be one answer. The fact is that there are good arguments on both sides that you need to weigh before the policy decision. Is it good public policy? And my view is no, but I try to steelman all sides of the argument in this book, which is very rare because so many people want to just tell you what they think and make your mind up for you. But being in the inside of the system and seeing how it works and operates, I think I can see a lot of the different things that most people haven't considered. Usually people have one or two things that they go off of, and that's the limit of it. A couple counter arguments, a couple examples, and that's about it.
My posture is, if we've gotten it wrong once, that's one time too many.
Yeah.
And the government, we have a government, Steve, that doesn't even deliver mail on time, especially during the holidays. We have a government that can't even give us accurate COVID numbers. And I say this absent of hyperbole or any exaggeration. Why would I trust the government literally with my life?
Well, and I mean, what they've gone after the January 6th people is a good example of overpowering your prosecutors' offices, which we have here. See, upon the horizon, nodding my head to Demetrius' pro-life argument based on the gospel message of restoration and redemption through Jesus, right? And it's interesting because when I was drafting this book, I kind of do these. I write books publicly, and so I on my channel I talk about what I'm doing, what I'm writing about, and I said, send me your. I did an hour-and-a-half stream on the reasons that death penalty is a good idea, and I did an hour-and-a-half stream on why it's a bad idea, and that was the genesis of this book. And I'm like, well, I could tell you, but it'd take me 3 hours. And when I got through with that, somebody sent me like, I'm going to tell you why that the death penalty is not only biblical, but it's required. Jesus wants us to have the death penalty. So I'm like, oh, really? Well, send me some. Let me see. What's your biblical citation? So he sent me all these biblical quotations, and they ended up in the book on the anti-death penalty side, because I'm like, I think your father, what is his name? Brother Phil, the death penalty the chaplain up in the Florida State prison system. Are you familiar with him? He wrote several books on the biblical view and very in-depth. He's a Catholic lay minister, and he's witnessed over 20 executions, and he's been up on death row, and a fascinating, very pro-life, anti-death penalty advocate who ministers to the condemned on death row. And he wrote a very extensive, biblically based and cited book. And so I used that as my reference. I went back and checked his references and got the full context. And it was so anyway, be careful. The little humility is required in these things. But what you said earlier was, if the motivation is vengeance and retribution, that is not a Christian. That is not in congruence with Christian thought. Fair enough?
That's fair. That's fair. The scripture even goes further to tell us that fear is not of God, but fear has to do with punishment. And so the scripture says, "I've not given you a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind." And so, um, we want to put to death people that we are afraid of. Yeah, people that we have biases against. The death penalty has a history of racial and cultural biases, and it's all equated and centered in fear. And I think as a believer, we have to challenge ourselves to make sure that our views are consistent and not just based off a knee-jerk reaction to current events.
And it's an easy token to throw out to say, well, I'm anti-crime, therefore I'm the death penalty, and you're soft on crime because you just believe in life in prison without parole. Right? I mean, it's like really, it's really a marginal issue when you talk about. We have 350 people on death row in Florida and 22,000, I think, people life in prison. So basically, if we had all those people were converted to life sentences, instead of 22,000, we have 22,350. If they were all executed, it wouldn't make a hill of beans difference to the crime rate. It is not going to do anything except extreme cost and soiling my state. I had an interview with somebody that about a year ago. She came on, and she was close friends. One of her high school friends and was condemned to death and was executed in Virginia. And she talks about her suffering, like, how do I view my state that killed my friend? And how her father, the father of the son, it was his only son, committed this murder. And it destroyed the father. He drove around with the ashes of his son in his truck for 2 years and withered away until he died of heartbreak. And it's like, how do you view your state? I mean, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of victims surrounding, not just the victims of the family members of the family members of the murderer's family that are innocent victims. And it has this ripple effect. And it's a suck for talent. You know, I'm focused, when I do a death case, I do nothing but that for 3 months for one case. And it's like, I want to be doing other things that are more productive. And I think it's a waste of talent and money and time and effort. It's just, I've got so many arguments. Again, death penalty debates, guys. Well, Dimitri, where do you want to take this conversation? Because I've been leading. You tell me what you want to know and what you want to talk about.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you for being gracious with your time, having me on your show. I do have to sign off here, but I'm very fond of the conversation that we have, and I would love to continue the conversation, whether it's about pain, grief, and sorrow, the death penalty. But I'll let your audience know where they can find me. You can follow me on Twitter at dminor85. You can find me on Facebook. You can also follow me on Instagram. You can follow our organization on Twitter as well, CCATDP, and find us on Facebook at Conservatives Concerned About the Death Penalty. And then also, I know, Steve, you said several of your listeners or viewers, rather, was interested in that Bible study. I actually tried to sign in YouTube and tried to sign into the chat, and it wouldn't let me. But if you're interested, just shoot me an email, and my email is dminor, DMINOR, 85 at Gmail. And would love to hear from you.
Excellent. Well, you know, and I will take you up on that. We have a number of people in the chat here. One of them is Jill of Graceful, and she's Graceful Ministries, and she runs a Bible study in Jacksonville and broadcasts that every Sunday and does a Bible study online. And she's kind of one of upon the horizon, if I can ever get him out of his shell and come on a stream. I've got a lot of people that like talking faith, and it's great to make this connection with you. And I would love to have you on just to talk faith on before you leave, you know, Joe of Good Logic, my Orthodox Jewish friend, is coming on Thursday night at 8 p.m. and we're going to talk sex, drugs, and rock and roll. A Jew and a Catholic discuss.
That should be a memorable conversation.
Yes. Well, thanks for coming on. Well, let's give a hand to Demetrius, man. You are awesome. I'm so happy. And believe me, let's do it another time. And I look forward to it.
Let's do it. I welcome. And
All right.
share my email.
Right,
please share my email with your audience.
Say it one more time, so the people, so they got their pencils out. My people have pencils.
Okay.
Say it one more time. Contact Demetrius how?
D Minor, DMINOR 85, the number 85 at gmail.com.
Perfect. All right. Well, you're a welcome guest, and it was an absolute pleasure. And if you need, you don't have to sign off, because we could leave Ghazni. I can talk all night. I was on the radio too. I was a radio guy.
I was a radio guy. But if I don't go home for dinner, I'll probably be a dead guy.
I got you. Well, you go give love to your family. We didn't talk about family, but we'll have you back on sometime soon.
I appreciate
it, Demetrius. See you later.
Be blessed.
Oop, all right. Oop, how cool was that? That's Demetrius Minor. See there? Where else do you get? That's like, I like new people. We see the same old faces, and let's bring in some new folks and hear what they have to say. We had Lord of the Real on a music stream, and we'll get Demetrius come on and do some more faith talk. So that was cool, huh? And he's got a really neat organization, Conservatives Against the Death Penalty. Very good. And he's involved with the DeSantis administration. So see there, we are not all goose stepping marchers to the same tune. So yes, and Roosty, good to see you here. I'm glad you popped in. Glad to see it. Like and subscribe and do all the stuff you're supposed to do. And yeah, upon the horizon, I love it. Good to see you. Let's see. I did want to let's sign. Let's go ahead and shut it down. I've got a few things I wanted to tell you about. Let me see. Maybe. Well, I've got some things here. Maybe I'll just save it. But Death Penalty Desires, the R-rated version, is now available as ebook on my website. So you can download this as an ebook on my website now. Of course, Death Penalty Debates also as an ebook or as an audiobook. This one, Death Penalty Debates, you can get it on Amazon and Kindle. Death Penalty Desires, here's what's going on with that. The PG version will be available on Amazon as an ebook and as a softcover. The R-rated version will be ebook only available from steveghazni.com. So you choose. If you don't like R-rated stuff, then get Death Penalty Desired with a D. It's the PG version. If you want the smut, if you want the sex scenes and stuff, then get Death Penalty Desires, the pink Desires versus, because this is Death Penalty Desires, Passion, Lust, and Murder. And the PG version is Death Penalty Desired, Passion, and Murder. See, no lust. See how it works? See there? Clever, huh? Yeah. Lily, he was a great guest, wasn't he? Don't ask Joe about relativity. Note to self, do not ask Joe about relativity. Yeah, that was a fun stream. I smell brownies. My wife is making brownies and some tea. So we're having tea and brownies. So that calls me. And but I think this was great. See you on Thursday night, 8 o'clock. Thursday night, 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Joe of Good Logic and myself will have a stream, Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. Faith and or Jew and a Catholic discuss. So boy, that smells good. So I'm gonna sign off. Good night, all. Thanks for showing up. That was a great stream. I'm really happy we did that. Good night.